I was awoken in the middle of the night by a frantic-looking man. I was taken aback, ready to grab the closest thing to me and defend myself. I was about to let out a yell when I saw the look of manic desperation on his face trying to shush me. "Please, please. I don't want to hurt you. You have to pretend like you're looking for something or they'll kill you." The man trembled, holding his finger up trying to silence me. He immediately stepped away and walked towards my closet, opening it and riffling through my belongings. He mouthed, "Please," to me as he continued to search. I was half out of my bed when I heard the shuffle of a dozen feet around my house. Doors swung open. Plates crashed on the ground. Furniture toppled over. Footsteps began to stomp towards my room, and in a bit of desperation and blind trust, I hopped out of my bed and began opening the drawers closest to me. The door swung open. 3, maybe 4 other men entered the room, immediately combing through the area. They dispersed, finding their own nooks and crannies to ransack. The man and I eyed one another as we pretended to rummage through my belongings. One of the men started to scour near us, his hands and fingers bloodied and worn. I didn't know what they were searching for, I just knew that I needed to pretend to look for it too. After a while, my entire room had been turned inside out. The men marched outside, and we followed suit. I walked out of my room to see my house in absolute shambles, greeted by more strangers that had also ransacked the area. Are they looters? I thought to myself, staring straight ahead, trying not to distinguish myself in the crowd as we all walked out. I followed our would-be mob outside and was paralyzed at the sight when we hit the streets. A mass of other bloodied-looking scavengers tossed through the area. They rummaged through the cars and bins, entering every alley and establishment they could. On the ground were corpses, disfigured as if it was mauled and torn by savages. My heart sank, knowing that could have been me had the man not begged me to join the search. I could hear the cries and pleas from the ground. The merciless mobbing swept through all of the buildings and streets. Those that didn't join or turned away from the violence quickly met the same fate. What was I to do? It's been a day since I was woken. My hands are weary and stained. I've not made an effort to communicate with the mindless horde around me. They don't know I'm not one of them as long as I keep looking. I still don't know what I'm looking for, perhaps a place to hide? Maybe something to defend myself? All I know is I have to keep looking. My kid recently got into what I can only call a cult. There are strange herbs involved and chanting. I was happy to support them at first. It seemed harmless, but the constant smell of the herbs, both bitter and pungent, began to drive me crazy. I asked them to limit this, and at first they complied. A few new friends came over, wearing cloaks, and skulked outside for a bit. There was some ceremony involving a cat and some garlic. The cat walked off after 5 minutes. I don't think it liked the smell of the garlic. Then there was the chanting. Loud and discordant. Again, I do try to be open-minded with these things, but honestly inviting others over again and the resulting noise, and the dark hooded cloaks and then human organs all over my lawn, it was just too much. All the neighbors complained about the smell. I had to hose it down. My kid promised me he'd stick to doing his practices in the basement, but imagine my horror when I went down there one day and saw a portal to another realm. I just saw red, and after I'd beaten the tentacles back I put my foot down. I still have a scar on my arm from one of them FGS. There was also a horrendous amount of burning herbs again. I don't think I should have to put up with this in my own home. He swore to me this would be the last time anything weird happened, but last night I came home and found him and 3 friends trying to sacrifice Grandma in the living room. The living room. Who does that? Grandma's fine, by the way. She's been sacrificed before, but that was before her sciatica, so of course I was livid. Plus the mess all over the rug which I had to clean. I've told him he has to move out. He called me an AH. Ida? Are you sure you want to go out in that? The tone was condescending, with a clear hint of underlying disgust. No dear, I'll get changed right away. Mary was used to Steve's comments by now. At this point they barely fazed her, and it was easiest just to agree with whatever he said. He was usually right, after all. She quickly tried on another dress, hoping Steve would be more pleased with this choice. Ugh, it still looks awful on you. Not flattering at all. Steve held up a few dresses to Mary to see how each looked. Each time he shook his head, indicating his displeasure. He was thoughtful like that, Mary reasoned. Always taking the time to ensure she looked presentable. You know what the problem is, Steve blurted out, before answering his own question, it doesn't suit your eyes. Mary nodded in agreement. After all, her eyes were an awful green-a-blue shade that didn't work with anything. She made a mental note to buy some colored contacts that would please Steve. Steve hadn't always been so fussy. He first met Mary after an accident years ago and helped nurse her back to health. He was kind back then, and she relied on him. Now though, he was getting more and more obsessed with her appearance. First it was her hair. Much too long, Steve would get frustrated at how much time it took to style. Who else was she trying to impress anyway? So she cut it short and dyed it blonde. Steve loved blondes. Then it was her weight. She was skin and bones and needed some meat on her. 56 pounds added so far. Steve was obsessing over the littlest things more and more recently. Rather than order some contacts online, Mary decided to sneak out while Steve was in work to get them a little quicker. As she walked along to the local shops, she spotted a number of posters all around town. A missing persons poster of a young girl who had gone missing years ago after suffering a head injury. There were new reports she was last spotted in this area, it seemed. Poor girl, Mary thought. Something seemed familiar about her.